Hi, I'm Derri, and I've read it before. I'm back, and this time I am going to talk about Thud. Thud is the second to last book in the Discworld Watch series, and it finishes a tiny arc between itself and the fifth element. It's not the fifth element. It does say so on the reading order, which somebody else pointed out to me, and I thought it was a joke, but it's not. It's there. I'll even put the link for this in the description. You can check for yourself. Anyway, that's not relevant. The fifth elephant is the beginning of this particular story. And because it's a continuation of that story, we've got a lot of the same things. We've got a lot of resistance to change. We've got a lot of how far do you go to resist that change? How underhand are these extreme elements in society prepared to go? And where we had in the fifth elephant, they stole the extremists, the deep downers. They had stolen the replica of the Stone of Scone. This time they have found the clue to a very old mystery. Excuse me. They found a clue to a very old mystery, and it's a clue that very soon everybody's going to find. And it has to do with the Battle of Koom Valley. Now, Koom Valley has been being mentioned in the City Watch books since way back when. And because it's this ancestral rivalry, well, it's more than a rivalry. I mean, it really is. It's a species hatred, really. Koom Valley was that quintessential battle for both nations. And many, 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 many years ago, an artist quite famously painted a massive painting about this battle. And think of it very much like the, I'm trying to think of the name of it. There's a famous tapestry from the Battle of Hastings in 1066. I can't think what it's called now, but it's really famous. It's this massive tapestry, and historical figures have been recognised on it, and it's completely gone from my head. Anyway, this artist in Discworld has created something very similar. He's painted this enormous painting. And as usual in the City Watch books, we have things going off on tangents. So we have Reg and Nobby, because they're Reg and Nobby, and you kind of want them out of the way when serious stuff is going on. They have been allocated the mystery of the missing painting, while all the rest of the City Watch is trying their damnedest to stop the city exploding for this year's Koom Valley adventure, debacle, riot, whatever you want to call it. Tensions are high. And much like last time, where a lot of the events began with the discovery of a dwarf corpse, this time it's the non-reporting of a dwarf corpse that gets Vimes riled. And in investigating this, he comes up against something he hasn't encountered before, and it's this sense of religion amongst the dwarves. And any dwarf will tell you they're not religious. That's not to say they don't have a god, because they do, but their god requires them to get on with it for themselves, and he's not there to fix stuff for them. But the deep downers have a problem with a very fundamental aspect of the teachings of their god, in the way that most dwarves just leave it as how it is, that the trolls were an unexpected result of the creation of life, as per the dwarven god's version of events. But the deep downers find that instead of being an unexpected thing that's like, okay, that happened, is an offence to them, and they would quite like to see trolls wiped off the disc. So, in the process of investigating the missing dwarf, because at this point we've not had an admission of any foul play, Vimes, I'm trying to think if it's a spoiler, kind of is. Okay, I'll dance around it a different way. One of the fundamental aspects of Vimes is his rage and his control over his rage. And something occurs in Thud that engages that portion of his brain to an extreme level, to a level that has quite profound side effects. Leave it at that. We've had a new recruit in the watch, and her name is like 3 pages long because she's a vampire, and they pretty much collect names as they go along. And her name, just call me Sally, just rubs Vimes the wrong way. He's had enough of being pushed into taking people into the watch that he doesn't really want, because he knows he shouldn't be. Is vampires a species? I don't know. A subgroup of, I don't know. He shouldn't be being bigoted against vampires, and he knows this, but he also knows that, damn it, I've let every other minority in the watch. Can't I keep one out? No. This bothers him a lot because it means he actually finally has to accept that, yes, this is just a mindless bigotry. There's no reason for it. And he doesn't like that in himself. One of the other things that goes along with Sally is, because she's from Uberwald and because she's a vampire, she gets on immediately with the Watcher's Igor, because vampires are vampires and Igors are Igors, and they both very much feel very comfortable with falling into those roles, which really bugs Angua. And for much the same reason. She too is from Uberwald, and her role in Uberwald is on the outside. She has bad hair days around the vampire, and when a werewolf is having a bad hair day, well, so yeah, but that's an entertaining little storyline going along there. We follow up with Nobby, who, after the events of Jingo, and I mentioned in the Jingo video, he has very much become more aware of himself and he desperately wants to find somebody in his life. And he is actually going out with a stunningly gorgeous woman. And no one can work out how that happened, because it's Nobby, whose species is indeterminate. And she is jaw-droppingly beautiful, who happens to work at a strip club, the Pink Pussycat Club. And this does come back. This isn't just a random piece of plot work. So we've got lots of those sort of things happening. And as per usual with Terry Pratchett, it all kind of gets tied together. And it gets tied together around this missing painting. It gets tied together around bigotry. It gets tied together around these extremist elements. And it gets tied in a huge big bow around Koom Valley. Also happening in this story is a rather quite beautiful nod to parenting. With the events of the fifth elephant, that's when we found out that Lady Sybil was going to have a baby. The events of the Night Watch was the successful birth of that baby, thanks to the connections that Sam had made in the past, bringing that connection forward into the present. Well, little Sam is not quite toddling, I don't think yet. Almost speaking, so maybe about one, maybe 1.5, just a little one. And Vimes has promised to himself, to the part of him that is answerable to himself, that he will be home every night at 6 o'clock to read little Sam his bedtime story. and quite early in the book, we see how far he is prepared to go to make that happen. Because he won't miss it. If he will miss it for an important reason, then other things can make him miss it. And if he starts missing it, then it becomes normal to miss it, and then he's not prepared to even take a single step down that road. He will be home every night, 6 o'clock. And that plays a part in the story. And rather charmingly, this actually is one of the little spin-off novels, because the book that he reads to little Sam every night is Where's My Cow? And it's quite charming, and not unlike baby books everywhere, mindless and aggravating, but if you try and switch it up to make it more interesting for yourself, the child is not having it. All of these things are happening. We get a look at how Lady Sybil was as a young woman, because the painting that has gone missing used to belong to her family, and her family had donated it to the museum. So everybody's tied into this story in one way or another. And a lot of the themes around acceptance of change, of progress, and what that means to societies, I think will always be timeless. I think this is a book, this little arc with the dwarves and the trolls in The Fifth Elephant and Thud. I think these are elements that will always be relevant, because change is a constant. If it's the one thing you can be sure of, is that things will always change. And most of the time, those changes are toward a more inclusive and more accepting society. And these two books touch very much on how do we help, aid, smooth, how do we make that change effective? How do we make it stick? How can us as a society take in new things, take in new information and change how we used to behave, take in new aspects of other cultures and grow from it? Which, hey, you could argue, and successfully, that that's what all of the watch books are. And it gets touched on, as in all of the books, very heavily. And I just think that makes them so timeless. They will always be relevant, I think. So, yeah. The solving of the mystery, it's Discworld, you know the mystery's going to be solved, you know it's going to have a happy end. The solving of the mystery is rather fun, pulling as it does from lots of little nods in pop culture, because again, that's what Sir Terry does, and the more you read these books, the more aspects of what he's leaning on you recognise. I wish I could think of the name of that tapestry. That's an important historic, almost document, as far as what people considered important to record in this tapestry at the time. It starts with a B. It'll come to me hours after I finish filming this. If I find it before I start editing, I will put it on the screen, because it's bugging me a lot. There are elements of Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code that was pretty much on all of the bookshelves around about the time this book came out, or well, about a year or so before. Again, I'll check with the dates. There are other little nods to progress and change around the family portrait that Sybil is trying to get done. There are nods toward background underground work with people. There are nods to the hard work that a lot of politicians, would you call them politicians, embassy staff, people who hold their positions but not necessarily at the result of a vote, who have been put in place to smooth diplomatic relations with other nations. And Thud takes a very respectful thank you to those people in the behind the scenes work that they do to encourage peaceful negotiation, to put the right people in the right places at the right times, to have the discussions that need to be had. And I think that that's phenomenal. Overall, Thud is one of what I think are underrated books in Discworld. And I think part of that comes in feeling like it's repeating a lot of the themes from The Fifth Elephant and not recognising that they're both part of one story rather than the single stories that we have for most of Discworld, which is totally understandable. And I do think that if somebody hadn't told you that this was linked and it was simply a continuation of that story, it would be very easy to miss. And it's kind of why I'm doing these videos, because these are the links that, if you know about them, change your experience of reading them. So I really do hope that you watch Thud. They haven't done an adaptation of Thud. I really do hope that you read Thud, that you are able to get all of these little nods and references and nuances from it, and that you finish it with the same sense of hope that I did. And there's really nothing more you could ask from a book, really, is there? So I'll ask you to like, I'll ask you to subscribe, and with that I'm going to love you and leave you, and see you next time.